Good evening, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us tonight. We're here to chat tips on using Generation UCAN. A lot of you folks may be new users. We certainly want to help you out, figure out how to get the most out of Generation UCAN, and also tell you a little bit about how it's a little bit different than a lot of the other carbohydrates and sports nutrition products out there. I want to apologize for signing on a few minutes late tonight, just working our way through a couple technical issues, but we're ready to rock and roll. I'm Varn Sriram, your host, joined by Seth Bronheim, as always, our registered dietitian. Seth, how are you doing tonight?
Doing fantastic, Varun.
All right, so I think before we really dive into UCAN, we want to take a look tonight at a lot of the typical foods that people are consuming prior to a workout and sort of get you thinking about what we're used to consuming before a workout may be problematic. We're talking about foods like bananas, bowl of cereal, a bagel, some sort of energy bar. Seth, what's happening when you consume these carbohydrates to give you energy before you exercise?
So the problem, really is that the foods we're consuming, maybe they're convenient, maybe it's just traditional, you know, sports nutrition foods, is that once they're broken down, all their calories, rush the bloodstream very quickly, and it provides too much sugar in the bloodstream at once, and and really that's what causes, high blood sugar, which means that your blood sugar is too high, and then what goes up must come down, and that's why people you know when they have foods before, sometimes they don't have energy sustained throughout their exercise.
Even something like a banana, it's a fruit, it's something that we perceive as healthy. But Seth, give us a perspective. How much sugar does a typical banana contain?
Well, it's got around 20-25 grams of sugar depending on the size of the banana, um, and, and even a banana that might be perceived as healthy, it might not be what's best before an actual exercise bout, especially when you want to exercise that you want to keep your blood sugar steady.
So we're going to talk a lot about blood sugar today. It's going to be something that we keep coming back to over and over again, and it's very important, I think, right off the top for us to define the concept of blood sugar. So, Seth, what is blood sugar? And you've referenced how some of these foods may elevate your blood sugar levels, cause highs and lows. Why is it important to avoid that?
Because the main thing, and really why we feel fatigue, it's very much related to our blood sugar. And all your blood sugar is the amount of sugar in your bloodstream. So if there's a small amount trickling around and keeping yourself steady, your brain takes some of that, your cells take some of that, and everything's all well and good. The problem happens when, let's say, on an average, a person might have only 5 grams of sugar in their bloodstream floating around, and let's say you have a bowl of cereal, and let's say that bowl of cereal contains carbohydrates will get broken down to sugars very rapidly, and you're throwing 50 grams of broken down sugar into your bloodstream, which is 10 times the amount of sugar that was there at rest. And that's a real emergency signal to the body. Then it wants to get rid of that sugar very quickly and store it away, and that's why you get highs in blood sugar and then also lows, because your body wants to get rid of it as soon as possible.
So, as we talk about this idea of blood sugar, this graph is going to represent what's happening with a lot of the foods that we're consuming before exercise. Seth referenced that spike in your blood sugar levels. If you look at the red curve on that graph, you see exactly what Seth's discussing, represented visually. It is that feeling of a rush of energy or a surge of energy, and we call it different things, a buzz, a sugar rush, a sugar high, but as Seth mentioned, you get that spike. When you get that drop, you see certain things starting to happen. Seth, what are we see it on the screen, some of the negatives of that high, those highs and lows in energy.
So let's just talk about just in general 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because that gives a lot of people a lot of perspective. If you consume, let's just say soda, you're gonna get all the you look into it to kind of just sustain yourself throughout the rest of the afternoon. You're gonna get a bunch of sugar in your bloodstream, and then it's going to come down because you're a hormone called insulin, which is a storage hormone. Once you spike that blood sugar, which you're showing here, a hormone comes into the bloodstream to bring your blood sugar back down, and that's why it comes down so rapidly. But the big problem is that spikes and lows in blood sugar it can cause fatigue and then stress hormones to increase to help bring your blood sugar back up. And one of the big problems is that your brain is the thermostat for your blood sugar, meaning that if your blood sugar starts to go down, your brain's going to notice that and it's going to tell your body, hey, let's get that blood sugar back up. And that's why those stress hormones increase, and it's this constant high and low curve. And it's really the opposite of trying to get steady energy.
So there's a another important point that we want to identify as we talk about carbohydrates in food that are providing you with energy. And that's the way your body's able to get fuel for any type of exercise or even just for energy throughout the day. There's really two sources of fuel for the body, and number one is carbohydrates. Number two is fat. Seth, what's the difference between those two fuel sources?
So one of the big things is that you know even the leanest people have thousands of calories of stored fat to use. Yet you only have small amounts of liver glycogen and also muscle glycogen, and glycogen is basically your stored form of carbohydrate. So think about your muscle cells storing cereal in your cells. And you know the thing is that because you have such a plethora of fat stores, you want to be able to access those so you can spare the amount of carbohydrates used. But the main thing is that your fat stores can really feed your muscle cells. And if you're looking over here, there's something called liver glycogen, and that's really what is used to fuel your brain, especially during times of low energy. And a big thing is that your body only has 100 grams of stored carbohydrates to feed your brain. And so the question that you're really looking at here is that how do I use these 100,000 calories of my stored fat so I can feed my body and rely on less carbohydrate? And that's really what this graph is showing. Fat's an incredible fuel source. It actually has double the energy compared to stored carbohydrate. Fat has 9 calories per gram, whereas stored carbohydrates only have 4 calories per gram. And the big thing is that the more fat your body uses means the less glucose you use, and that means more glucose is spared for your brain to use. And that's a really key point, because the main reason a lot of people bonk and exercise is because their brain is in a fuel crisis. It's not that because they have tons of calories stored away. It's just that the brain is saying, what about me?
Fat is, as you mentioned, it's a very plentiful energy source. What we hear a lot of people ask is how easily accessible is fat as an energy source? Carbohydrates are always what, especially if you're an endurance athlete, you've been taught you need carbs, carbs, carbs. But really, for anybody exercising, there's always been a thought that carbohydrates are what give you that energy to exercise. Is fat something that can be easily accessed?
It's kind of funny because especially for exercise and in general at rest, muscle cells want to use fat for fuel. That's what they thrive on. Um, but but the adaptation to exercise, the way you go from being able to run 5 miles to 10 miles, or going from 10 miles to completing a marathon, or just getting through a 1 hour workout that might be 30 minutes on with weights followed by a 30-minute run is this your mitochondria, which is your powerhouse of those muscle cells. They actually upregulate enzymes to burn and mobilize and use more fat for fuel, and actually spare these stored forms of liver and muscle glycogen. So isn't that kind of funny that the adaptation to exercise is using and becoming a better fat burner? Yet, if you take in too many carbohydrates, you take your body out of that ideal state, and that's why people are crashing more. They're just not allowing their bodies to use what they have. And to kind of take it one step further, it's kind of interesting. We always think about calories as what we consume, our bagels, our bananas, our different foods. But the truth is our best form of stored calories is actually our internal fat calories. Because if you can tap into those, and we'll discuss why that's how you do that, a big thing is when you tap into them, that's what allows you to have basically an unlimited access to fuel.
Sorry about that. So that just got bumped off for a minute. Moving on, as we discussed the profile of, we talked a little bit about the foods, but let's look at the profile of most of the sports drinks that we see out there. And most of them are sugar based, or they have a carbohydrate called maltodextrin. Seth, talk us through a little bit of this. What's the issue going on with a lot of the actual sports nutrition products and not just the foods? Seth, are you still with me?
I'm still with you. Are you still with me, Varn?
Okay, sorry, little internet issues here, but we're talking about the sports nutrition products. What are the issues with a lot of the sports nutrition products? Your simple sugar based, your maltodextrin based sports drinks.
So the main thing is that these these simple sugars problem is that when you consume those, it's too much sugar entering the bloodstream at once. And you might use them, during exercise. And then maltodextrin, which is a slight improvement to simple sugars because it's a little easier on the stomach and a little bit of a slower burn, but it still spikes your blood sugar. So all these carbohydrates spike your blood sugar too quickly, and you have to repeatedly use them. And also, because you're spiking your blood sugar, you spike your blood sugar. The body says, "Hey, I got all this sugar in my blood. Don't burn fat." So too much sugar in the blood during exercise, your body uses those sugars over that plentiful amount of fat stores that we were talking about in the last slide.
So let's talk a little bit transition now. We've sort of identified some of the fundamental challenges that we all face with the common things that we use to fuel ourselves. And with Generation UCAN, what's really unique about it and different aspect of it is really what it was created for. And that's who you see on the screen right here. This is Jonah. Jonah is who Generation UCAN and SuperStarch, which is the carbohydrate in UCAN, was originally created for. So, Seth, what's the issue that Jonah had with the way his body produced energy?
So Jonah had a very rare blood sugar disease, which is actually quite similar to type 1 diabetes, and it's where they suffer from life-threatening low blood sugar, and it's basically a disease where their livers can't release glucose into their bloodstream. And just to give everybody a little perspective, the way we're all sleeping throughout the night, and people without this disease, is that our livers release, roughly 6 to 8 grams of glucose per hour to keep our blood sugar steady at night. Yet, kids with this disease can't do that. So before the 70s, they couldn't even survive infancy. And then later in the 70s, it was discovered that plain cornstarch, that Argo cornstarch you'd find at the supermarket, would give just enough glucose out of their outside of their liver to keep them alive for roughly 2 hours. But the problem is it's short-lasting. You have to be fed 10 to 12 times a day and 3 or 4 times a night. So that puts a lot of stress. There's actually a great film on YouTube called Life by the Clock describing this disease and what the parents face. So our founder's wife, looking for a better way, they worked with top carbohydrate researchers in the world and get all different types of carbohydrates to help stabilize blood glucose longest in those kids. And it turns out that our carbohydrate SuperStarch, which are starting ingredient, is non-GMO waxy corn, is what was used to help keep them sleeping throughout the night for 8 hours. And that's what the original purpose was for.
So what is SuperStarch? You said it's derived from non-GMO corn. Sort of what exactly is it? What are some of the characteristics of it?
So our carbohydrate starts with non-GMO waxy corn, and then there's basically a heat and moisture process, slightly similar to baking bread, where it slows the hydrolysis, meaning it slows the breakdown of the carbohydrate into your intestines. So because of that, it enters the bloodstream at a very slow and steady rate, but for a sustained amount. And what's really cool is that because our first customers were 2-year-old babies, there were no enzymes or chemicals used. It's an all-natural carbohydrate, that was used to help cure that disease, and now it's being used for all different health implications.
So we are getting a little bit, just a few more slides of the science, but the purpose of this is really to understand how we fuel the body and really understand that what we're talking about with UCAN and SuperStarch is a fundamentally different ingredient. Again, we're not talking about different ratios of different kinds of sugar molecules. This is really something completely unique that was created for a purpose and is really changing the way a lot of athletes and people just exercising for fitness are fueling their body. So we've gone over blood sugar. We've got an understanding of blood sugar. The fundamental thing that SuperStarch is doing is really keeping your blood sugar steady, thus giving you steady energy for a long period of time. Seth, with SuperStarch compared to maltodextrin, you might tell us, where one would find this maltodextrin carbohydrate, what it is, and how SuperStarch is behaving differently.
So maltodextrin is pretty popular in a lot of your typical sports nutrition products, Hammer Nutrition, Infinite. It's the main component of a lot of gels and goos. So what happens with maltodextrin is that the calories enter too quickly, you spike your blood sugar, and when you start exercising, just kind of take a step back here. You start warming up. Your muscle cells open up and they want to take in sugar out of your bloodstream. So the problem you run into is that if you don't have a steady release of glucose, you're going to feel a little low, as you can see with that blue line. With SuperStarch and UCAN SuperStarch, it's a slight rise. We stabilize, but then it also declines steadily. And this is huge because most of the time carbohydrates rapidly drop, like you can see, but we're really giving you little bits of energy over time, keeping the system stable, and it's at the rate the brain and muscles need fuel. You don't want to dump a lot of sugar into the bloodstream and the body compensate, because your body's always going to try to figure out a way to raise your blood sugar back up. But with us, it's really a direct source of fuel out of the intestine into the bloodstream all throughout your exercise. And this is a big point. You might be 30 minutes into your workout. If you had a banana or an energy bar before, those carbs would be long gone. But with UCAN, you're still getting fresh glucose out of your intestine into your bloodstream, keeping you stable. So you could have a serving of this and still be sustained and stable, an hour into a workout, and that's a pretty powerful feeling.
Another big aspect when you don't have this sharp rise in blood sugar, we talked about the ability to access fat and how powerful fat is as a fuel source. What we're really looking at it on this graph, and this was conducted at a clinical trial at the University of Oklahoma on racing team cyclists. They ingested both the maltodextrin and the SuperStarch before 30 minutes before they got on the bike for multiple hours, and they tested their blood sugar levels and their insulin levels. And Seth's going to tell us the significance of this hormone insulin and how it affects fat breakdown in the body.
So as I was talking about, when you spike your blood sugar, the body says, I have all this sugar in my blood. So what happens is that all that sugar is a signal for a hormone called insulin. And insulin is a storage hormone. It comes into your bloodstream to bring your blood sugar back down. But it has a second function in the body. It tells your body to prevent fat burning and tell your body to start storing fat. So that's a big problem in that when you spike that insulin, because of the blood sugar spike, you can't access your fat stores. So the most remarkable finding amongst all of our experts, top carbohydrate researchers and top sports dietitians, was that we completely flatline the hormone insulin. So we are the only carbohydrate on the earth where 100% of it is absorbed as energy, meaning every gram gets broken down into energy in your blood. And since we don't have the insulin reaction, we prove that that you can burn significantly more fat throughout, but also post-exercise. And that's really big. You get the energy of the carbohydrate, but you continue to break down fat.
As we just move through one last slide here regarding the science of UCAN, I do want to let everybody know that at any point, if you have any questions about specific usage, what you're interested in using UCAN for, please feel free to address them in the chat. We're happy to answer questions. And really, the second half of this session is going to be all about catering it to you. Whatever you folks want to hear about the application of UCAN, if you want to have your specific situation answered, if you want to just come on and share your experiences with us, that's all good. So let us know in the chat function there, and we'll be happy to interact with you that way. Seth, as you were talking about the rate at which UCAN promotes the use of fat for fuel, we're showing this last graph. This is basically measuring the amount of fat that's being burned throughout exercise with SuperStarch and maltodextrin. And as you can see with the red line, you are burning more fat fueling with SuperStarch prior to exercise. What's happening from a recovery standpoint, though? This is pretty significant finding as well.
So you're burning more fat throughout exercise, but also when you take a serving of UCAN post-exercise, you keep your blood sugar steady so you slowly replenish the body, but also keeping blood sugar steady after workout is huge to keep your energy levels up. I mean, everybody knows what if, if you're a runner out there or you're an exerciser, you know what it feels like to, after a workout to not keep your blood sugar steady. You might feel low and kind of fatigued. But with UCAN, keeping your blood sugar steady after the workout, as you see in this graph, you're actually allowing your body to continue to break down and burn fat. So it's huge for someone who's looking to get the first off recovery benefits by keeping their blood sugar steady afterward, but also if they're trying to lose a few pounds, continue to break down fat. I mean, you spend so much time in that workout stimulating fat burn. A big thing to remember is that fat breakdown exceeds fat burning in many workouts, meaning that your stored fat is breaking down, but it needs a little bit more time to fully burn and fully get rid of. So if you keep your blood sugar steady and allow your body to take advantage of what's also called the afterburn window, you're able to take advantage of burning more fat. And this is how a lot of people have really been getting great body composition and fat loss results because they're surrounding their workouts. It's kind of interesting. I was doing a run the other day, and I had a scoop of our UCAN before a run, and 45 minutes later I had a scoop of UCAN afterward. And I couldn't. I've been doing this before, but it was a different type of workout I did, and it was more of a running workout, and I could not believe how sustained I was through the rest of the day. I had a very busy day, and it was just amazing that I kept my energy up, and I'm not really a guy who's that good at running, and it was just kind of really remarkable how the UCAN was fueling a non-runner.
We do have a couple questions that are coming in, and as we address the first one from Jack, I do want to find out from everybody what you're interested in using UCAN for, or what you do use UCAN for. So everybody, you'll see the poll on your screen. If you could just go ahead and give us an idea, we can tailor what we talk about based on what people are interested in hearing about. Seth, while they're doing this, let's address Jack's question. Jack was wondering if we have any athletes using UCAN to feed during a 5-hour endurance event. He says it's a bit chalky in taste and asks if that makes it difficult to use as fuel during competition. So, Jack, there's really a host of examples of this. I'm going to let Seth address how one would fuel and how athletes are fueling with UCAN over an event that's that duration. Seth, go ahead.
Yeah, so Varn, we were really just at this. I mean, we were at the Raleigh 70.3, and there's a bunch of people that can finish that in 4.5, 5 hours. Varn, what was that guy's name? Sorry,
Seth,
so
I
he
just
was
lost
using
you again.
UCAN.
Go ahead.
I was just going back, and I was trying to find out. Remember, we were at the hotel, and there was that guy was explaining he just finished the Raleigh 70.3. It was just such a great example.
Oh yeah, that's right, Frank.
UCAN.
Absolutely. He was using the scoops of UCAN from the tub, and he was basically taking in one scoop about every 75 minutes, about 80 calories every 75 minutes. He ended up doing 5:10 half Ironman in 5 hours and 10 minutes on just about 5.5 scoops of UCAN. Less than just around 480, 500 calories, no additional carbohydrates or calories, and just water, sipping on water during.
Yes. So the thing is that what most people do for exercise that's 5 hours, the first way to start out is really just have it before your hour-and-a-half workouts during the week. I mean, that's just such a great start for it. Have a scoop, have a packet, try to experiment a little bit. But then for those longer workouts, what most people do is they simply have 2 scoops before, roughly 30 minutes before, and then our starting point is really having roughly a scoop to a scoop and a half every 90 minutes. And what people will do is they'll either, if they're a runner, they might use a fuel belt. If they're on the bike, is obviously easy. They might take a 20-ounce bottle and put 3 scoops in there and have a third of it every 90 minutes. And in terms of the chalkiness, we know it's a little starchy, but I take pride in that starchiness, and it's just a matter of using enough water, making sure it's cold water, and shaking it hard. And people also concentrate it, which makes it a little thicker, but so that's more personal preference. Other people, as Varn's showing here, they might take our lemonade and put that in 8 ounces of cold water, shake it hard, or they might take a 10-ounce fuel belt bottle, put 2 packets or 2 scoops in there, and have a half of that every 90 minutes, and that might take them through. If you have 2 scoops before a serving in 90 minutes in, and another serving 90 minutes in, you're really that's basically around a 4 or 5 hour event. Um, that's our starting point. I think the main thing is that you have a scoop to 2 scoops 30 minutes before your 5 hours, and then a scoop to a scoop and a half every 90 minutes. And you can kind of individualize from there and really experiment. But that's our basic starting guideline. As you saw with Frank, he had a serving every 75 minutes. And the main thing is you can go much longer and not gels and goos and sugar-based sports drinks. And
And
you're burning more fat, which is where your calories are coming from.
Jack, what's also important is if you're planning to use UCAN over the course of a several hour endurance event, you really want to think of UCAN as a fuel source and something you dose with rather than something you sip on. So, whether you're using the packet or you're using the scoop, and you see how the conversion chart over there, whichever one you're using, you get that entire serving in you within a 5 to 10 minute span, and then allow it to slowly release. So when Seth talks about either 1.5 scoops every 90 minutes or a packet every 90 minutes. He's really talking about, drinking that within a 5 to 10 minute span, not sipping on it like a traditional sports drink. Seth, Ed wants to know what the shelf life is of a mixed bottle of UCAN. Can you mix it prior to an event, a 70.3 or a 140.6? Ed, you can certainly mix it, 24 to 48 hours in advance with no issues at all. Many people will refrigerate it the night before, and then they'll take it out the next morning. You just want to make sure to shake it up before before you drink it if you have mixed it up the night before, because it is a starch. It won't dissolve in water, so you just want to give it a good shake prior to that. But Seth, you even had some folks that you heard of freezing it. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it's actually funny. I actually had someone also make it into using some sugar-free Jello and making it into a Jello mold. I had a dietitian tell me that actually just yesterday. Um, so people are being very creative. They might make popsicles out of it, just using the UCAN water and freezing it. Um, and I think the main thing is that we've had people do 24-hour runs using it, and they kind of they just make multiple bottles and work from it that way. Um, a lot of people just simply have a scoop, before they're waking up. They might have a 6 a.m. run, and they'll have a scoop, roughly before, and by the time they put on their shoes and socks, it's been roughly 15 minutes, and they head out for their morning run. So it's really replacing that banana, that energy bar you might have before an afternoon workout, or something to kind of kickstart your day as well.
Patrick asks, he says, you suggested mixing 3 scoops in a 20-ounce bottle and drinking a third of it every 90 minutes. Is there any risk of it spoiling due to extreme heat? Patrick lives in Florida. He says training rides in 90 degrees with 80% humidity. Seth, answer the second part of that question, and then I want to go back a little bit to what Patrick mentioned in the first part of it.
Yeah, I mean, you can always use ice, but we've got people in down in Texas with that heat, and they're all using it. It might get a little warm, but everything gets kind of warm when it's so hot out. So I mean, we've had some people find actually some really great bottles that help keep things cold longer, and they've been saying that really has helped them tremendously. So if you can research those bottles that keep things cold longer, I mean that's a good solution, and yeah, that's the best we got, I think, Varn.
Yeah, so Patrick, regarding it going bad, it certainly it won't go bad, and it's just more of a, like Seth mentioned, with anything that you're consuming as a powder, you'd rather, from a taste perspective, have it cold, which is why as we mentioned with Ed, some people will refrigerate it or freeze it overnight to ensure that it's cold as possible. You'll just find it tastes a heck of a lot better when it's cold, but no risk of it spoiling or making you sick because it's spoiled. Regarding the 3 scoops in the 20-ounce bottle, the biggest thing that you're going to want to figure out individually with UCAN is really how long that serving lasts you. So we sort of have a baseline recommendation, and I think Seth mentioned it, but I think it's also worth repeating. if we're looking at the sports drink mix on the screen, in terms of a serving size, one packet is the equivalent to 1.5 scoops. So we basically say that a packet for most people, if you're exercising 2 hours or less, and I know that this is a little bit of a repeat, but I just think an important point to clarify. A packet should suffice for exercise 2 hours or less. Now, if you're going over 2 hours, the reason we suggest the packet every 90 minutes is because UCAN isn't something that's rapid. The SuperStarch is all about that steady release. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes to kick in. So if it's lasting you 2 hours, but you're going over 2 hours, you really want to back time each dose and take it every 90 minutes. So by that 2 hour mark, it would have started kicking in again. Now with the scoops, it's the same thing. We've been finding that for workouts, in that 90-minute range or less, people will use that one scoop. It's perfect, like Seth mentioned, for that hour-long workout. So if you are using a scoop, we really, same way with the packets, we recommend taking a scoop every hour. So just to answer, your specific situation, Patrick, you'd said 3 scoops in a 20-ounce bottle. So I would just drink a third of that if that's how you're going to do it. Play around, see how long a scoop lasts for you. But as a starting point, I would recommend a scoop every hour, a third of that bottle every hour, and then you can go ahead. It'll probably start lasting you longer and longer as you train more and more with it. Jack wants to know if it's Seth. I got to give this one to you because this is one of the common ones. Would you ever combine UCAN with the gel? For the caffeine or for getting mentally alert. So I definitely want you to hit on that point of the mental alertness and how steady blood sugar affects that. But Jack's also asking, would that throw off the beneficial effect of UCAN? Go ahead.
So by keeping your blood sugar steady and having UCAN steady release, it really makes a gel in terms of the sugar content really not necessary. And a big thing is that if you're training with UCAN during the week, before your hour swim, your brick, where if you're a triathlete might be an hour swim, hour bike kind of thing, you're training your body as we went back to really become a better fat burner throughout the week. You're teaching your body to upregulate enzymes to burn more fat, and so you don't need those incoming calories. I mean, we really don't need 200 calories per hour to fuel our bodies. We're using our internal calories, and over time, you become a better fat burner. And also, just keeping your blood sugar steady is really key. I mean, we have NBA athletes that do full NBA games on one packet for 3.5 hours. So, I mean, and they're really good fat burners, but the UCAN is keeping their blood sugar steady in the background. And the other thing is, once your blood sugar starts to drop, which is what those a goo can do, it can spike you up and then it can come back down. It's not giving your brain even energy. You want it to come nice and steadily to feed your brain at a steady rate. For those people that want caffeine, I think there's better ways than having it with 25 grams of sugar, which is what, and those goo packets, a lot of them only have only a small amount of caffeine. So, and the best thing about caffeine is that it also helps your body mobilize and mobilize more free fatty acids, which can help almost have a synergistic effect with UCAN. It's not providing energy, but in some it might be helpful, especially deep into an Ironman or a half Ironman. So I might recommend other ways to get caffeine without sugar, if because it's the caffeine. I was just speaking to a guy. He's actually a personal trainer, and he was saying that he really uses those goos for the caffeine kick. Yeah, he kind of realized, it's like I'm getting the caffeine, but it's coming at a price. The price is an extra 25 grams of sugar. So he's like, why don't I find the gel? It's pure caffeine and just go from there. They've got some great espresso type gels that don't have any sugar in it. Or he said, you know what? Maybe I'll just have a little bit of iced coffee or figure it out that way.
Good tip from Karen that she just sent us. She actually, for her bike bottles, as we're talking about consuming UCAN during an endurance event, if we're talking about a triathlon or a long ride, she puts the spring from the shaker bottle. If any of you have seen the UCAN shaker bottles or just have a blender bottle with one of those spring balls at home, she puts that into her bike bottle and finds that if she shakes it up a little bit like that, if she's having UCAN during her ride, it'll help keep it from settling. So thanks for that, Karen. That's a great tip. And, great idea. Let's talk a little bit about the differences between the sports drink mix UCAN and the protein enhanced mix. So we just had a question asking, is it a matter of preference which one you should use pre-workout, and how do you go about making that decision? So Let's start by looking at the packets. All of the packets you see, the three colorful flavors, the fruit flavored UCAN, the sports drink mix on the left, contain roughly 110 to 130 calories. They contain 30 grams of the superstarch, and also have electrolytes, sodium and potassium. So those are intended to be used 30 minutes prior to a workout. Now, with the protein enhanced UCAN, the chocolate and the vanilla, you've got the same 30 grams of that super starch. You've also got the electrolytes, and the only difference is you have 13 grams of added protein on top. So these are roughly about 220 to 230 calories, about 100 calories more. And with the same amount of the key ingredient, that super starch, from an energy perspective, you really will feel the same no matter which one you use pre-workout. So the answer, Ed, is you can use either flavor pre-workout and have that consistent, steady energy. But Seth, why would one use the protein UCAN pre-workout?
So the main times is if you are someone who's exercising in the morning, let's say it's your first meal of the day, you're having a scoop of the chocolate, you can, or a packet of it, the extra protein will help curb hunger in the stomach, and you also haven't had protein for 8 hours because you've been sleeping. So, and those people who are hungry in their stomachs in the morning, and if it's their first meal before exercise, that extra protein can help curb hunger in the stomach. The other time you might want to use the extra protein is if you're someone who's prone to muscle loss. Um, so that's where it can play a great role. Some people do if it's going to be a 45-minute run, they might do a scoop of the chocolate protein enhanced before and a scoop afterward, and that's really how they surround maybe a 45-minute run in the morning. I mean, you can always use it for recovery afterward, and that's really key to sustain your energy and help you slowly replenish. And the protein in there will help drive cellular repair and help rebuild your muscle cells after a hard workout in the morning, which is good. And you can always then have a healthy meal, an hour and a half later, depending on personal preference.
Couple other questions. Talking about mixing UCAN with caffeine, or I guess the question actually is, would we ever make a version of UCAN with caffeine? Seth, we're talking a little bit about caffeine, but what is the interaction between superstarch and caffeine? We talked about things that we wouldn't want to take in conjunction with superstarch. That's something with a lot of fast acting sugars. How does caffeine interact in terms of blood sugar and in conjunction with superstarch?
So, in terms of blood sugar, it depends on the person. Some people are very sensitive to caffeine, can have blood sugar issues, but the majority of people, it just gives them a little bit of a kick. Um, the other big thing is that caffeine does help mobilize fatty acids, like I was talking about before. So it might have a synergistic effect with UCAN, and you could always, treat your body like a laboratory and experiment in different ways. But I think the main thing is that, especially for exercise and performance enhancement with caffeine, you adapt very quickly to caffeine doses during exercise. So it's very important to not have those during normal training, because the truth is that if you might want to save it for race day. It all depends on what you're prioritizing. Or is it for a race, or is it just as a supplement to your daily training? It all depends.
So, Jack, in terms of making a version of UCAN with caffeine, I think what's important, what we're trying to get people to think about UCAN as is UCAN something really that's going to help you maximize your training and not help you get off that reliance on that sugar buzz or the stimulants, even on race day. There may be a place for them for some people, during a very hard, intense race to give you that kick at the end. But really what UCAN is doing is training your body to utilize the available fuel that's already in your body, long term, that's just a much healthier solution. As I was reading an interesting article, I believe it was in the New Yorker from a couple weeks ago, talking about endurance athletes and how a lot of endurance athletes are training for long periods of time and putting in a lot of work and not necessarily seeing the body composition or the weight loss results that they desire. And I think a big part of that endurance training is just that thought or that reliance on constantly feeding the body, constantly fueling the body to get through the exercise. So what's really fun is when we get stories almost daily about people telling us how they've started to wean themselves off the sugars. They've started to surprise themselves, 18 miles on one packet of UCAN before my run, and it felt steady throughout. Those are the types of things that we're hearing as people train more and more with Generation UCAN. So, Seth, one big thing that we haven't really talked about is how UCAN is extremely easy on the gut, and we'll go back and get a little sciencey for one more moment. From a molecular level, what makes UCAN such pass through the stomach with such ease? Something that's really, really beneficial for endurance athletes.
So the big thing is that your small things that are in energy bars and gels and goose, those contain very small molecules, and those kind of trickle in the stomach, and it causes a lot of stomach pressure to get them through because they're so light. UCAN has a much heavier, more complex molecule. That's roughly, those carbohydrates in energy bars, those are roughly 180 grams per mole. Our carbohydrate is roughly 500,000 grams per mole. So we're 4,000 times larger, of a heavier, more complex molecule than those simple sugars. So we move through the stomach rapidly, and all digestion and absorption takes place in the intestines. So we're not even your stomach to bother it.
There's also the other point of, sorry, go ahead, Seth.
Go ahead, Varun. No, you're good.
No, I was going to say, you mentioned that there's also the idea that you're just not repeatedly during exercise putting as many calories on board in order to, as we mentioned before, regulate your blood sugar, keep your blood sugar stable. So when you're consuming less, it stands to reason that you're putting less in your stomach that could potentially bother you.
Exactly, and that's really big. You can focus on your performance, focus on the exercise, not worry about when's my next feeding. It's kind of it takes away that stress.
So Jack also wants to know, are we having any elite athletes perform at national or world class levels in endurance events with UCAN in their training and for their competition? So Jack, certainly, our launch was really in endurance. So from a running perspective, the first athlete to really utilize our product was Meb Keflezighi. Just finished fourth at the Olympics in 2012 in the marathon. New York City Marathon champion in 2009. Really a world-class athlete. And what's interesting is Meb's used it a variety of ways. So I would say the most common way that he utilizes UCAN is he actually does use the protein UCAN for recovery. And Meb trains at altitude. He trains in Mammoth. So he's got about a 45-minute drive from where he was living to get to train. And then when he's done training, he's got a very focused stretching routine, 45-minute drive home, gets a massage, takes a bath. Oftentimes it's 2 to 2.5 hours before he can get a proper meal in him after a hard training session. And as we were talking about, with the ability to maintain steady blood sugar, that's a huge aspect of using UCAN for recovery because when your blood sugar crashes post-workout, you're going to feel that ravenous hunger. You're oftentimes not going to be able to get through that post-workout routine that you want to. So from a recovery standpoint, Meb's really found that utilizing UCAN after a hard training session is helping tide him over until that next meal. He's also found a big difference in terms of soreness. And Seth, we were talking about this earlier today, but what is the potential theoretical effect of UCAN on preventing soreness, preventing that lactic acid?
So, a lot of the recovery drinks today contain maybe 50 grams of sugar and 25 grams of protein.
And Seth, I'm sorry to cut you off, but just for 1 second, you could incorporate this into your answer because Patrick just asked a question along these lines. He wants to know how the UCAN protein would be different to, like, say, a muscle milk. So, as you're talking about this, take that into context too.
So, the main thing is that, after a workout, there's a lot of recovery drinks that contain, 4-to-1 ratios of carbs to protein, or 50 grams of sugar and carbohydrate to 10 grams of protein. And the problem is that flooding your body with those sugars after workout spikes insulin. And there's a lot of research showing that insulin spikes are associated with inflammation and pain. So UCAN, because of the low insulin response, also keeps your body burning fat in the post-workout period while you keep your blood sugar steady. The other big thing that a researcher, and I'll go back to the protein aspect, but big thing is that the researcher Kathy Yeckel was discussing was that, a lot of the replenishment research and recovery research was done on men, and women are actually people that they burn they're better fat burners in general. And if they can spend more of their time burning fat, the recovery can be better because their energy is more steady, and they don't need to have such rapid, fast-acting carbohydrates after workout because their body wants to burn fat even more so. And so after a workout, you keep your body burning fat. You're going to lean down, but also you're going to be getting better energy because you're not relying on incoming calories that can spike your blood sugar and cause you to kind of get low. I mean, I've experienced this firsthand where I had a recovery drink. 30 minutes later, I'm crashing because I had that huge spike because it was 50 grams of sugar with 25 grams of protein, and I was starving afterward, and I just wasn't able to keep weight off the way I wanted to. I was gaining a little bit of muscle, but I just wasn't. This was more strength training workouts. Um, but in terms of, so the main thing is that after workout, you keep your blood sugar steady, you keep insulin levels stable, and that's one of the reasons why Meb was feeling less sore. And maybe increasing spikes in blood sugar might disrupt the recovery process of micro tears in the muscle cell. So there's more research needs to be done that, but we have a lot of people recovering faster. And it could just also be that their blood sugar is steady, and when your blood sugar drops after a spike and crash in blood sugar from a recovery drink, or you don't properly refuel afterward, your body's going to break down stored proteins to raise your blood sugar back up, and that's also why you might not be recovering well, because that protein is the fuel for recovery. To go to the question on how does UCAN's protein compare to muscle milk, they're both protein sources. The big thing about our recovery drink is that it's our SuperStarch plus protein. They work together. You can always, if you like a protein source, you can always buy our plain UCAN and add your favorite protein powder to it. It's really that combination of UCAN SuperStarch plus added protein that's ideal for recovery. So that's really what you would want to do. So feel free to mix any protein powders you like with our plain UCAN, or use our protein enhanced version, and even add extra protein if you're someone who's looking to even get even more protein in the body post workout.
Now, Jack, just one more piece of perspective on your original question as well, in terms of some of the elite runners and how they're using it. And I don't know if you're more of a triathlete or a runner, but we gave a perspective on a marathoner like Meb, who is using it a lot for recovery. For middle distance runners, two that come to mind, Kim Conley and Julie Cully, both 5,000-meter runners for the Olympic team last year. And as well, another 1,500-meter runner finished fourth at the Olympic trials last year, named Gabriel Anderson. The three of them have all told me the same thing, that for those middle distance races, UCAN really just helps them take the guesswork out of nutrition. In the past, sometimes it was, whether it was trying to fool with some sort of meal before a race, it was sort of, can I get that same convenience of having whatever I want when I'm racing over in Europe, and when I'm not, in the luxury of being in a country where I know what's going to be available, where I have my own kitchen. They'd all tried the goo approach before, the gel approach, and again felt that crash, that initial surge of energy, but having to fuel with them repeatedly over their training sessions would create that crash that we've been talking about. So all of them have pointed to UCAN as being something that really takes the guesswork out of how to fuel. And any day, wherever they're training, wherever in the country they're competing, they know they can have that UCAN in their backpack. They know they can take it 30 minutes before an exercise and know exactly what to expect. It's going to be that even and consistent energy. In terms of before a race too, for a lot of these athletes, you may go out and warm up for 30, 40 minutes before a race, and then you may have to wait around a little bit without the opportunity to go back and consume nutrition. So even for some of these shorter events, having that UCAN 30 minutes before the start of a race, or before the start of the time where you have to be out there and warm up, it's going to carry you through that entire window of time where you may have to compete. So that can offer you a little bit of perspective on how these athletes are using it. Seth, speaking about what we see on the screen, I mean, I think this is the biggest question. We do have endurance athletes in here. The biggest question, and actually, you know what? As we hit the hour mark, I just want to do a quick notice. Happy to keep going as long as folks keep asking questions. But for everyone who's in here tonight, we just want to offer a discount to our online store as a thank you for joining us. So our online store is generationucan.com/store. I'm going to post that right here in the chat. You can use the code We Thank You. You also see it in the chat for 15% off. That code is going to be eligible on all items in the store. The chocolate and vanilla protein tubs are two things that you will see is out of stock right now, but those will be back in on Monday. So if that's what you're interested in, make sure to check back on Monday. But just a big thanks to everyone for joining us, and thanks for the participation too. So we wanted to just keep it rolling, but yeah, Seth, I think as we talk about endurance athletes, the biggest worry that a lot of people have, and one of the big questions is how exactly am I replacing, 400 calories that I used to be consuming from a gel, to get me through my 90 minutes or 2 hours of activity? How am I replacing that with just 130 calories of UCAN? So how is that happening?
So the real way you're doing it is UCAN's calories are first off much more efficient. They're entering the bloodstream still slowly and steadily rather than them all coming in at once and your body storing them away. The other thing is that you're accessing your fat stores, and those are the calories. I mean, as we were discussing, if you're, let's say you're at the top end, you're burning 60 grams of fat per hour. 60 times 9 is 540. That's where you get your calories from, and you might be burning 600 calories per hour that you would be burning during exercise, roughly. So I think that's really where your calories are coming from. Again, to reiterate, we always think about calories, what we consume, and a lot of endurance athletes have been told, take 200 to 300 calories per hour to sustain you, but you can get even more calories if you really think about it by consuming UCAN and burning your own stored fat calories. As I said, look at it, you can feed your body even more calories. So, those calories are coming from your own stored fat. That's a huge point because most of us think about the calories we consume again, but it's really our stored fat calories that are fueling us and giving us the energy we need. And we saw before, even the leanest people have thousands of calories of stored fat to use. So why not use them?
Another, as we're talking about using fat, the question about whether you need to train your body to be more metabolically efficient, and that term metabolically efficient really refers to the ability of your body to utilize your fat stores, what Seth was just talking about, as a fuel source. So the question is, do you need to train your body that way and do that through a controlled carbohydrate or a low carbohydrate diet to get the ultimate effect of UCAN? Seth, what do you think?
So the best example I always have is that people have all different types of diets using UCAN: high carb, low carb, vegan, vegetarian, and the best example I also is that we have NBA athletes that I was talking about. They have terrible diets. NBA athletes consume high carb, fried foods, all these kind of things. Yet when they consume a packet of UCAN before exercise, it lasts them 2 to 3 hours, and in games it lasts them 3+ hours. Sometimes the NBA players don't even have it at halftime. In those people that aren't elite athletes, it always benefits to kind of reduce sugars in general because they're just not they're poor for the health. You might want to try to limit crackers and carby foods that you can snack on too much. But it all depends on the person and how you tolerate carbohydrates. Meaning, if you get a real big spike in blood sugar and you feel that crash, you probably need to control your carbohydrate more. People that train their bodies on a lower carb diet and become more metabolically efficient, it's usually a faster route to becoming a better fat burner, but it also depends on your exercise demand. We have people that, like our elite runners, they keep high carb diets and they use UCAN before, but because they're training their body during the exercise to burn more fat, they're getting the adaptation. So it really depends on the person, but in general, the answer is really that it's just always important to reduce sugar consumption in general, just to keep body weight in check and have a healthier metabolism.
Seth, there is the thought in some circles. It was interesting when we talked to some triathletes this weekend at Raleigh at the Expo that the approach of training with UCAN and getting your body to rely on its fat stores is very beneficial during training, but then in competition, there may be the thought that I still want that rush of sugar that I'd get from a gel, or I still need that kick. How do you balance that? What do you say to people that may feel that?
You cut out there a little bit. You're talking about people that might want to become better fat burners, but they also want that kick.
That they want to become better fat burners and will do that throughout their training, but they really want that kick when it comes to competition day. So I heard some triathletes saying, I've been training with UCAN consistently, but the day of the race, I'm not sure if I should have my gels, because they think, it's really high intensity. I'm going to be going harder. Do I need that sugar spike? What do you say to that?
So the thing is, if you've been training with UCAN and you've simulated your race, I mean, most people feel really phenomenal when they keep their blood sugar steady and they're using UCAN during the race. The reason the gel usually feels good and that sugar kick feels good to most people is because their blood sugar's low. UCAN prevents that. And I think it's more of a mental thing. I think a lot of people are used to consuming those gels and they kind of expect it. So we've had people, running coaches that have been gels, and you really start using UCAN, you start training with it, really no food makes you feel the way UCAN does. And so if you keep your blood sugar steady, you don't need that extra gel. It's just not there. I mean, one of the top sports dietitians just said, when I take UCAN, I feel like I can keep going and going and going. And why take that away by a sugar spike? Now, the counter side to that is that, if you're, and, you want that kick in the gel because, let's just say, it's just something you feel you need a little bit of a sugar spike just because you're still kind of getting used to using UCAN. It's okay for the last 45 minutes. I'd rather you save your gels for deeper in the training, save them until you need them, if you're still going to use them, and kind of just use less of them because it is unhealthy to use gels from the way they spike your blood sugar and metabolically. It's important to kind of limit them as much as you can and reduce them as little as you can.
Again, since we have a decent amount of endurance folks in here, Seth, what are some things, if you are using the UCAN exclusively during an endurance event, what are some other foods? And I'm about to post, you see it on your screen, a recipe. We call it UCAN Bites. If you do want something solid to consume during the event to help keep the hunger away, this is a great recipe that we call the UCAN Bites, that you can consume UCAN in a solid form. But what are some other things and foods that people could have that would work synergistically with UCAN?
So you can always choose a low sugar, protein bar, energy bar, and that really is there to help curb hunger in the stomach. That's especially exercise probably over 4 hours, where you might get a little hungry because you're exercising for a long period of time. People sometimes, if they're hungry on the bike, might have a packet of almond butter, or they might make their own UCAN Bites. They've been real popular. But we're hearing from a triathlete actually that was saying sometimes because of the GI issues and gut issues people can have, even if you're a little hungry in the stomach, try to train your body to ignore that. She was saying because you might not be able to tolerate the food you're taking in, and it can cause kind of that heavy feeling in the stomach. So it's pretty individual, but just choose a low sugar bar and you should be okay.
Let's talk about some pre-race meals as we talk about foods that work well with UCAN. Bob is sharing his feedback. He says his pre-race meal is typically he said haggle, but I think he meant bagel with peanut butter, unless there's a new food that I'm not hip enough to know about. A bagel with peanut butter and low sugar jelly, and a banana, and a couple cups of coffee for a 2.5 hour event. So how would you suggest that Bob fine-tunes that with UCAN if he were going to have UCAN as well prior to a race?
So, I mean, the thing I would probably do is I'd probably, what a lot of people are doing right now is they're sleeping in a little bit more instead of having a meal so early, and they might take our chocolate protein enhanced UCAN. They might have half a banana just for a little bit of extra calories, and maybe a tablespoon or two of peanut butter, and they're having this calorie-efficient shake that's also going to sustain their energy. You got some protein and fat in there to help curb hunger in the stomach, and they're having that roughly 2 hours before the race, and then having another UCAN 30 minutes before. If you're going to have a whole food meal like he's having, I'd want to make it balanced between protein and carb. If you're going to have a bagel, I might have some hard-boiled, some scrambled eggs or something, some protein, because if you have too many carbs in your meal before exercise, it's just going to cause too much of a blood sugar spike, and it's just too many carbs that, you never want to have carbohydrates alone, even if you got a little peanut butter in there, but I might take that, make it half a bagel, have 2 eggs in there, and maybe half a banana, And on the bagel, maybe spread a little bit of all natural peanut butter if I was not going to have the UCAN. But you might you might try to reduce those carbs, up your protein a little bit, and then 30 minutes before have a UCAN. So that's what I would do. I would try to balance out that meal with some less carbohydrate, higher protein from eggs or from a protein powder, and then 30 minutes before have a UCAN, or 2 hours before, like I was talking about, which is so popular. Have 2 scoops or a packet of our chocolate protein enhanced UCAN. Throw 2 tablespoons of peanut butter in there, half a banana, ice, make a thick shake. Have that, and then 30 minutes before, have your dose before your race. I mean, we had someone PR for Boston saying she did that. She had that protein enhanced shake. Then she had 2 packets of pomegranate blueberry 30 minutes before the Boston Marathon, and it's mile 16.5. Had another serving. That was all she needed. She said no GI distress. She said she PR'd and she's ready for Boston next year.
So I think the important thing, Bob, is really when we're looking specifically at the meal you suggested, and any meal you're thinking of in the future is really just make sure to get a source of protein in there. You really don't. This whole idea of carb loading. There was a great article in I believe it was just last week in Men's Fitness or either one Men's Fitness online, and it's just talking about this idea of the myth of carb loading, and it's something that as endurance athletes, as runners, we've always been trained to think that way. That I need carbs, I need to get a bunch of carbs on board. Seth, just to deviate for a minute, can you just shed your insight on that idea of carb loading and why it may not really be as effective of a technique as we've been led to believe?
Well, I think the main thing is that during your exercise, if you're accessing more of your fat stores, you don't need so much. You don't need to saturate your body with carbohydrate. I think it is important to have stored carbohydrate in your muscle cells because when you're going to sprint or increase the intensity, you want to be able to access those stores. Let's say you're sprinting up a hill, or or it might be on the bike where you increase intensity, or you might. But most exercise is intermittent, high and low intensity, depending on the course. But as long as you keep a healthy diet and you consume enough carbohydrate, enough stored carbohydrate, you should be fine. And I think the main thing is it takes a long time to get those carbs 3 hours before exercise to become glycogen, become your stored carbohydrate. So having it 3 hours before, it's gonna make you feel real full in the stomach, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be stored away for you to use, during your exercise. So I think, it's important to almost keep a healthier diet all around. Teach your body to burn more fat, obviously using UCAN before your exercise, and control your carbohydrate intake because consuming too many carbs for exercise can cause a huge spike, and then, if the race gets delayed or it's a slow start, you might, it's not really imperative to have 2 bagels and pancakes and really carb loading before. It's really counterintuitive in a way, especially when you're using UCAN. You don't need to carb load. A lot of people like that they don't have to wake up so early in the morning at 3 o'clock in the morning to have a meal. They can sleep until 5 and have their UCAN shake. And those 2 hours of extra sleep. You there, Varn?
Sorry, Seth, having some serious Time Warner cable for anyone that wants to call him for me. That you guys can be my friend and do that. But no, it's a great point. About carb loading, and I just wanted to add one final thing. The dietitian that was quoted in that article, she put it really in great terms, and she said her name was Abby McQueenie from Lifetime Fitness, and she commented that it's like cramming for an exam. It's you're not going to be able to compensate for low energy or for not having trained, excuse me, by putting a bunch of carbs on board last minute the night before the race or the morning of the race. The same way that I think we've all probably done it at some point, but I can't remember the last time cramming for an exam was really produced the results that I wanted. Maybe I wasn't a good crammer, but just thought it was a good way of putting it. So, Seth, as we wrap this up, and if anyone has any more questions, feel free to ask them here. As we wrap this up, what are some of the prime times you'd suggest folks use UCAN, especially people that are a little bit new with it, still fine tuning, it's still maybe figuring out how exactly they should be using it? What do you suggest?
So I think during the week, just start out during the week. If you're someone, um, UCAN is that pre-workout carbohydrate. So instead of having the banana, the quick energy bar, Red Bull with sugar, things like that, you have a scoop of UCAN with 8 to 12 ounces of cold water. You shake it hard, have it roughly 30 minutes before. If you're someone who loves to wake up and exercise, simply you can prepare a UCAN the night before. As soon as you wake up, slam that UCAN, and by the time you've stretched and put on your shoes and socks, you'll be out the door. Um, People keep a tub at work. They keep packets at work because they might, drive home and change. And so they say, hey, you know what? I'll have my UCAN at work. I'll drive home, put on my clothes, and I'll head to the gym. It's really huge because, most people today, as our audience knows, is we're working 8 to 10 hour days, high stress jobs sometimes. And after a long day, you want to have that energy to have the workout that's going to relieve stress and get you healthy. And UCAN is that tool for you to use, especially after the workday. That's going to keep your blood sugar steady. But the big thing is it also curbs your cravings and hunger afterward, so you don't eat a ton after the workout if weight loss and weight management is a goal. So, it's really cool. You can have a controlled dinner. The biggest finding we've had, especially since our product sold at Lifetime Fitness, is that a lot of their personal trainers use the product with their clients, and they really reported that their clients have reduced sugar cravings after workouts and throughout the day. So some people, even on non-workout days, say, hey, I need some energy at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Instead of having a third cup of coffee or, grabbing a granola bar that's going to make me want to snack throughout the rest of the night, I'll have a scoop of the chocolate protein-enhanced UCAN or a scoop of the lemonade with some water, and I'll have that at 2 or 3 o'clock and go home and not overeat at dinner and just keep my energy up without caffeine or sugars. So that's really it, Varn. And those looking to experiment, by the way, if you're not a person or a chocolate person, this plain UCAN tub you're looking at, one of the most popular recipes is a scoop of the plain UCAN with unsweetened almond milk and a few strong dashes of cinnamon. A lot of people who are cyclists do that before a 1 hour cycle class in the morning, especially for those people that don't want to consume a lot of liquid before morning exercise. So there you go, Varn.
That's great. You could also try the plain UCAN with the scoop of your favorite protein powder. Also works very well. If you scroll up in the chat, we posted some UCAN shake recipes, which have some of those suggestions, especially to use with that plain, that unflavored SuperStarch. It's just the pure carbohydrates. So, yeah, try them out. And thanks again to everybody for joining us tonight. If you want to reach out to Seth, if you have any specific questions, you can get a hold of him at UCANRD, like registered dietitian, at ucanco.com. You'll see that email in your chat. Remember the code We Thank You. I'll post it one more time for 15% off at our online store. And Facebook us, tweet us. As you probably saw today, UCAN is something that takes a little bit of experimentation, like anything, to really dial in. But once you figure out how to use it, and Seth and I are certainly going to help you get there, you're going to find that it's makes an amazing difference in terms of your overall fitness and your training, the ease of training, ease on your stomach, that consistent energy. It's all going to be there. So we're here to help you get there. With that, we thank everybody so much for joining us tonight. I know I'm going to start watching the NBA Finals right now. Seth, you'll probably do the same thing, and we hope everyone else enjoys the rest of their night.
All right. Thank you, Varn.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.